Chapter 2. The word that Ishaiah, the son of Amoz, saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem. And it shall come to pass in the end of days, that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established as the top of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all the nations shall flow unto it. And many people shall go and say, Come you, and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, and he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. And he shall judge between the nations, and shall decide for many peoples. And they shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more. O house of Jacob, come you, and let us walk in the light of the Lord. For you have forsaken your people, the house of Jacob, for they are replenished from the east, and with soothsayers like the Philistines, and they please themselves in the brood of aliens. Their land is full of silver and gold, neither is there any end of their treasures. Their land is full of horses, neither is there any end of their chariots. Their land is full of idols. Every one worshipeth the work of his own hands, and that which his own fingers have made. And man boweth down, and man lowereth himself, and you cannot bear with them. Enter into the rock, and hide you in the dust from the terror of the Lord, and the glory of his majesty. The lofty looks of man shall be brought low, and the haughtiness of men shall be bowed down, and the Lord alone shall be exalted in that day. For the Lord of hosts hath a day upon all that is proud and lofty, upon all that is lifted up, and it shall be brought low. And upon all the cedars of Lebanon, and all that are high and lifted up, and upon all the oaks of Bashan, and upon all the high mountains, and upon all the hills that are lifted up, and upon every lofty tower, and upon every fortified wall, and upon all the ships of Tarshish, and upon all the delightful imagery. And the loftiness of man shall be bowed down, and the haughtiness of men shall be brought low, and the Lord alone shall be exalted in that day. And the idols shall utterly pass away, and the men shall go into the caves of the rocks, and into the holes of the earth before the terror of the Lord, and from the glory of his majesty, when he arises to shake mightily the earth. In that day a man shall cast away his idols of silver and his idols of gold, which they made for themselves to worship, to the moles and to the bats, to go into the clefts of the rocks, and into the crevices of the crags, from before the terror of the Lord, and from the glory of his majesty, when he arises to shake mightily the earth. Cease you from man, in whose nostrils is a breath, for how little is he to be accounted. Okay, let's go up to verse 1. Now, yesterday, when Ishaiah had started to his prophecies, we find this was the time of Hezekiah and Uzziah and Jotham and Achaz. We know that there was great idolatry going on in the land at that time, and that we know that this was an example even of those things which would come, because God has said he had, from the beginning, has declared the end, and we will find that out to be truth, because all the words of God shall not fall to the ground. They're not like the words of men. The words of men, they go forth and they just fall to the ground. And we'll learn a little more about that. But we're going to pick it up here in verse 1. The word that Ishaiah, the son of Amoz, saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem. So now this is the word that Isaiah had, the way he understood things and what he saw was going to happen for what was going on at that period of time. And we're talking about that period of time when Israel's done been taken. See, Assyria's done come in and conquered Israel and taken them. And now even they will find that during this period of time that the king of Babylon now will start to present himself even against Jerusalem. And these are judgments of God, for they have sinned. They have brought idolatry in, even into the land. So God is going to punish them. And this would just be an example, though, of these great things that would happen even in the end when God comes to even deliver his people now. 2. And it shall come to pass in the end of days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established as the top of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all the nations shall flow unto it. See, because this is what's going to happen in the end of days. Now, everybody wants to hear about these end of days, and we just heard about these end of days, see, back in Micah chapter 4, and these next few verses actually will read verbatim exactly just like Micah read. 4th chapter, starting in verse 1 of Micah, is exactly just like chapter 2, verse 2 of Isaiah, and the next few verses will be the same words of. And because in the end, see, God's house is exalted. God's house, now we're going to find out, and God alone shall be established at the top of the mountains. And these mountains have always going to represent these massive high places, even of the earth. This is why they're compared to a mountain. And God's is going to be established at the top. And we have this as a comparison to these hills, even the nations, little hills. See, these are just the hills. But God's house is going to be above those. Well, we're going to find out. See, these hills are even brought low. 3. And many people shall go and say, Come you, and let us go to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, and he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. And we know Jerusalem is this place of peaceful teaching. Zion is that parched place that God set there now as a marker, even. For people are going to come to the house of God in the end of days. We're going to find out, see, because God's made a great example now, and he is going to deliver his people through this great example that he has done. And let God teach you of his ways. Well, what is the ways of God? The law, which he gave you to keep for your own good. How can we back that up? Well, it's right here. The law will go forth out of Zion. The law will go forth out of Zion. Of course, there's many who's going to teach you that you don't have to obey the law. I be watching these people, see. They're going to try to change the law, make the law into something else, but you can't change the law, see. First of all, nobody gave you permission to change the law. Nobody gave you authority to change the law. Not even the King of men can change the law. 4. And he shall be judge between the nations, and shall decide for many peoples. And they shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more. And we can see this certainly hasn't happened. This is all men know how to do, is fight amongst themselves, like there ain't no strife in the world. Like there ain't no hunger, like there ain't no thirst, like there ain't no problem, no struggle of any kind in the earth. They got nothing better to do than make war against themselves. See, this is the kind of strife we find in the earth, though, when we don't have God, and when we don't have the law of God. See, this is the kind of strife we find. But, now, we're going to find out. See, the day's going to come when the Word of God takes hold, and you won't have to have your swords no more. Why? Because it'll be a time to plow. You won't need your spears no more. Why? Well, it's going to be a time to cut back, even prune now, and remove the briars. 5. O house of Jacob, come you, and let us walk in the light of the Lord. In the light of who? In the light of God, in the light of the Lord, in the understanding of his law, in the understanding of his ordinances. This is the light of God. This is the light which he gave to man. Didn't have to have nobody go get it. He wrote it down from the beginning. It ain't nothing too hard to do. You do it for your own good. Let us walk in these ways. See, let us walk in these paths, for these are the ways of God. And this is the path to God. 6. For you have forsaken your people, the house of Jacob, for they are replenished from the east and with soothsayers, like the Philistines. And they please themselves in the brood of aliens. And God's not forsaken totally. God is punishing once again his people. They've been scattered out among all the nations. Ain't like God don't know where you're at. He's brought you there. He's caused you to do these things. He's caused you to bow down now. Get back up. Wash yourself. Make yourself clean. For they are replenished. They are replenished. They are made full. They're filled from the east. And what come from the east? All these merchandises, all these temptations, all these soothsayers, these enlightened ones, the east where the sun rises and understanding comes from. This is what that represented. And with soothsayers, these ones that always had something smooth to tell you, something sweet in their mouth, something to sell you. Like the Philistines, these drifters, these ones that have went astray, these ones that have drifted from the law of God, wandered. They please themselves in the brood of aliens. These strangers, they make themselves happy on these strangers. Why? They prey on them. Their land is full of silver and gold. 7. Neither is there any end of their treasures. Their land is full of horses. Neither is there any end of their chariots. These horses' strength, and these chariots, those places where they stand. This is where they stand, and they control the reins. Even these weapons of war. There's no end of their treasures. Their land is full of silver and gold. Their land's full of that which has passed through the fire, and that which belongs to God. 8. Their land is full of idols. Every one worships the work of his own hands, that which his own fingers have made. And that's the way it is today. Idols, idolatry. Everyone worships the work of his own hands and the God of his own understanding, he says. That which his own fingers have made. His own hands, his own fingers, he's meticulously put it together. We'll find out this is an image you've created, see. This is your understanding. This is not God's understanding. What did God say your understanding was? He said your understanding is the law. Your knowledge is the law. Your wisdom is the law. 9. And a man boweth down, and a man lowereth himself, and you canst not bear with them. This goes on today. They lower themselves and they bow down. You cannot bear with them. Endure. God cannot endure with this. And your filthiness and your ignorance. Worshipping whatever these things that are that you've made. 10. Enter into the rock and hide you in the dust from the terror of the Lord and from the glory of his majesty. That God's done this to you. God's brought you down. God's caused you to do this thing. Why, for your sin, you turned from the law of God. In the moment you created something and stood it up. You shall not raise yourself a pillar, this thing which God hates. 11. The lofty looks of man shall be brought low, and the haughtiness of men shall be bowed down, and the Lord alone shall be exalted in that day. The Lord alone, that don't mean he's got somebody with him. See, men always trying to put something between God and you. Well, there's one thing between God and you, and this is the law. See, the law. And that's all that's between you and God. And what is that? That's obedience. To do good. To want the good things in life. See? Driving evil away. I didn't say you had to bow down to evil. I didn't say you had to be weak 12. For the Lord of hosts hath a day upon all that is proud and lofty, and upon all that is lifted up, and it shall be brought low. These things that have lifted up, these hills, even these mountains that lifted themselves up, are going to be brought low. You're being brought low. All you that are proud and lofty, you can't hide. You're all dressed in your garments there. There's nowhere to hide. See, God's done made an example of you. He's done set you there. You can't escape now. God's going to make an example of you. See? Why? Because you exalted now against the Lord. You lifted up against the Lord. Your hands can't stand against the Lord. 13. And upon all the cedars of Lebanon that are high and lifted up, and upon all the oaks of Bashan, these cedars of Lebanon, this evergreen, this Asherah, that's what this is. They used to plant them on every hill, beside every high place, and Lebanon is that place that was made white. Oh, that pleasant place. Every cedar of Lebanon, and upon all the oaks of Bashan, these oaks of Bashan, that great shade tree, even, that's what this represents. The oak represents that great shade tree. God says, you shall not set me beside that shade tree. Why? Well, shades. And these shades causes shadows. It has to be full light, full understanding for God. Now, Bashan is that fertile plain, that fertile place, made fertile by the floods of the Jordan. 14. And upon all the high mountains, and upon all the hills that are lifted up. All these high mountains and these hills that are lifted up. God's bringing them down. How's he going to do it? Well, it's simple. He lifted them up so he could bring them down. See, that it all was balanced on a one little thing that God done. And we're going to see that's the law. It's the stone, it's the rock, and the Lord will require now his stone. 16. And upon all the ships of Tarshish, upon all delightful imagery, upon all your imagination, these images you have, these things, these images even, that you make for yourself. Tarshish, that stony region, that rocky region, that place of the Yellowstone, they appear to be gold, but it's not. What is it? Well, these are the words of men. I call them ankle breakers. They go out, and they fall down on the ground, and now, every man cast his stone, and the land is polluted. This is where they trip, and they stagger, they can't run, they can't walk hardly. Why? The ankle breakers of men are out there laying on the ground, causing them to trip and stumble. 17. And the loftiness of man shall be bowed down, and the haughtiness of men shall be brought low. The Lord alone shall be exalted in that day. Who? God. Who? With him? Nobody. The Lord alone shall be exalted in that day. For God caused all this. We're going to find out. See, this was all just an example God was going to make for you. A little example God was going to make for you. 18. And the idols shall utterly pass away. And that's what's going to happen. You're going to throw these things away. Well, you never needed them in the first place. God told you not to do this. You don't have no other God but me, he said. You shall not make yourself an image. Okay? You shall not use the Lord's name for emptiness. 19. And men shall go into the caves of the rocks, and into the holes of the earth, from before the terror of the Lord, and from the glory of his majesty, when he arises to shake mightily the earth. What are you going to do? You better find a place to hide in these caves, these hiding places, these holes even of the earth. Dig yourself a grave. That's what you're going to do from before the terror of the Lord. God's come now. God is coming to shake the earth, and shake it mightily now. And all these high places they have made, we know what's going to happen. They can't withstand the shaking thereof. They're brought low. And in that day, 20, shall a man cast away his idols of silver, and his idols of gold, which they made for themselves to worship the moles and to the moles and the bats, these things that dig in the earth, and these things that go by night. That's what you're going to do with your idols. These idols of silver and gold, these idols you cause now, even represent those that have passed through the fire. Your idols of gold. Gold belonged to God anyway. See, this is those idols you've even imputed those things of God unto. You made them for yourselves to worship. Cast them away. 21. To go into the clefts of the rocks and into the crevices and the crags, from before the terror of the Lord and from the glory of his majesty when he arises to shake mightily the earth. You'll be throwing these things down as you run to hide, see? Basically what all this means. Yeah, you'll be throwing them down as you run to hide. And we know, remember what the prophet said? Stay, stay. But none looketh back. 22. Cease you from man, whose nostrils is a breath. For how little is he to be accounted. Cease, Lord, from this punishment. Cease from man. This devours man, and it devours the souls of men. How little shall God count you? You're like dust to God. God made you from the dust. To the dust you return. And all your days you've done evil, not sought the Lord your God, to do good, to do after his laws. And now it shows mightily in the earth, and wickedness runs like a thief in the city. Turn, turn, and return, saith the Lord. All right, we're going to move on to chapter 3.